In this video, we'll be talking about software limits within OptimumCNC plasma cutting software and the ways in which we can override them. What the software limits allow us to do is essentially to draw some kind of a rectangle from 0, 0, the origin point, to some point on the machine that will then limit the movement of the machine, so we will not be able to move past this rectangle. So here I'm dealing with a machine that is 4x4, and to access the override for the software limits, we'll go into our homing tab and go to the soft limits section. So right now the limits are enabled and there's no override, it's set to 0. So if we travel in the positive x and positive y direction, we'll see that eventually the system will slow down and then eventually hit the limits at around 49 inches. They're set to be a little bit larger than the 4x4 reading would suggest. At that point, the screen will also light up in red for the limits that are affected. Here it's the software limit x and y for the positive x and y axis. And then if we move away from that limit, the notice will disappear. Notice that the same is also true for the z-axis. So for instance, on most machines, the z-axis upper limit will be at 0. So if we try to move up, eventually we'll hit the software limit. The jog button will light up in red to indicate that we cannot move any further, no matter how much we press. And the system will stop until we move the z-axis back down to a safe operational height. Now if we go into our homing pop-up window and go into our software limits, we can also enter a software limits override. So for instance, let's say that normally we would have our 4x4 machine, but maybe there's something located in this upper corner, maybe there's another large part that we don't want to hit, perhaps we are simply making sure that our tool is constrained to some kind of a smaller rectangle, etc. Whatever the reason may be, we can then enter our software limits override. So let's say, for instance, for our x-axis, let us enter 30 inches. So the new limits will be 0 to 30 for the x-axis. For y, we're not going to enter an override for now, so there will be none, and we'll be able to travel to our former limit of 48 inches. So here, let's say we move to the right, we hit this limit, the system will give us an error and we'll stop. And for the y-axis, we'll travel up and hit this typical limit of 49. Let's say that we also want to make the software limits to be larger than the default value. For me, the default value is 49 by 49, or about 4x4. Normally, this can be done through things like the machine setup, which is a subject of a different video. So for me here, it's the 4x4 that is selected. However, let's say that we, for some reason, have a machine that is actually larger than our regular 4x4. We can enter a value that is larger for both axes, let's say 60 by 60. And now when we travel in the positive x and y direction, the system will respect those new override values. Of course, we can also disable software limits altogether, which means that in that case, we're simply going to rely on hardware limits. So we make sure that the sensors are set up, and those are the only things that are stopping the machine. For me, I don't have any hardware sensors set up right now, so I can move the machine freely until it essentially hits the limits for its motors. Let's say it hits the edge of the machine. Of course, that's not safe, so typically we recommend to set some software limits and to keep an override at a safe value. Thank you for watching.